There are 10,000 ways to die in the 41st millennium, but only one way to truly live, in service to the Emperor. That truth was branded into me before I ever stepped into the iron belly of a Leman Russ battle tank. The galaxy is nothing but a graveyard of broken worlds, and for most men, the only choice is whether they die forgotten, or die remembered in fire and steel. I chose the latter, though some nights I wonder if the tank chose me. The inside of a Leman Russ is no home. It is a steel coffin, bolted shut with only a slit of vision and the thunder of cannons to remind you that a world still exists beyond the armor. 5 men live within her hull: commander, gunner, driver, loader, and vox operator, each a cog in a machine of death, each chained to his duty. I was the gunner, eyes fixed on Auspex readouts, ears deafened by recoil, and hands blistered from cycling weapons until they burned red-hot. We sleep in grease-stained fatigues, wrapped in the stench of Promethean. We eat ration paste that tastes of rust and ash. The roar of the engine never stops, a heartbeat of iron that lulls you into a restless half-sleep. The war doesn't pause so you can rest. The tank doesn't care that your bones ache. You serve until you can't, and when you can't, the Emperor provides someone to replace you. Still, there is pride. To command the fury of the battle cannon, to know that a single shell from your hand can tear apart a mob of orcs or silence a heretic fortress, that is power few guardsmen ever taste. We are the mailed fist of the Astra Militarum, the line breakers, the wall smashers. Infantry cheer when we roll past, because they know their lives depend on the thunder of our guns. But pride is a fragile shield against the darkness of this endless war. Every crewman knows the truth we never speak aloud. Our tank is both weapon and tomb. When the armor buckles, when the hatches jam, when fire seeps inside, there will be no escape. We'll burn together, screaming prayers to an emperor too far away to hear. That is what it's like to serve as an Imperial Guard tank crewman. To breathe oil. To bleed steel. To live knowing your soul is chained to a machine that will carry you into the jaws of death again and again. Still, if you crave more tales from the grim darkness of the far future, and if you find meaning in the roar of cannons and the courage of men who face the impossible, then support this channel, strike the like, add your name to the ranks by subscribing. The Emperor protects those who stand together. Our story begins on the ash wastes of Barrett Secundus, a world long since reduced to cinders by endless orc raids. My crew's orders were simple: hold the line, crush the greenskins, and buy the Imperium another day. Simple, but never easy. Morning inside a Leman Russ is no sunrise, no dawn chorus, no warmth seeping through shutters. Morning is the engine growling back to life, coughing smoke and fire until the whole compartment shudders. It is the loader swearing as he stacks shell after shell in the racks, the commander barking status checks, and the driver cursing at a stubborn gear linkage. It is ritual, mechanical, unchanging, as if the tank itself demands worship before it will kill in the Emperor's name. I remember our commander, Lieutenant Vera. Her voice was a blade, sharp, precise, cutting through the din of the crew compartment with no wasted words. She would never admit it, but she loved the tank as if it were flesh and blood. She called her Saint's Fury, and though the rest of us just called her the Beast, we followed her faith because in a world gone mad, believing in a machine was better than believing in nothing. My duty was the gun. Every morning I ran my hand across the breech of the battle cannon, feeling for cracks or warps. Every groove in the steel was memorized. I checked the coaxial heavy bolter, the sights, the oil lines feeding the recoil system. These were the hands of a man condemned, but they were steady, and when the time came, they would deliver death with precision. Our vox operator, Joran, tuned into the regiment's chatter as part of his ritual. His ear was always pressed to static, one hand scribbling orders in grease pencil across the compartment wall. You could tell a lot about the day ahead by the tone in the voices over vox. On quiet days, the lines were filled with idle songs or muttered prayers. On bad days, it was nothing but screaming until the channel went dead. That morning, it was quiet. Too quiet. The loader, Cast, was already sweating. His muscles were corded from heaving shells the weight of men, each round slamming into the rack with a hollow clang. He joked that he'd load shells in his sleep one day, but the truth was, he already did. Half his body moved on instinct, the other half drowning in fatigue. Finally, there was Breck, the driver. He was the youngest of us, a hive-born rat with quick hands and quicker temper. Every morning, he cursed the tank's gears, the dirt that clogged the treads, the Emperor himself for sending him to this ash-blown hell. But when the order came to move, no one coaxed the machine like Breck. The tank responded to him as if it knew his touch. This was our routine, our ritual of survival. It kept the fear at bay. Let us pretend that this life was normal. Steel instead of sunlight. Promethium instead of fresh air. Orders instead of freedom. Outside, the wasteland stretched endless, black with ash and pockmarked by old craters. Orcs roamed it like carrion beasts, fighting among themselves when there were no guardsmen to kill. Somewhere, out there, thousands of men just like us were waking to the same rituals inside their own steel coffins. Together, we formed the Emperor's armored fist, raised against the green tide. And yet, as I wiped grease from my hands and ran the morning checklist one last time, I felt it, a tremor in my bones, an unease that had nothing to do with the orcs. It was as if the tank itself was holding its breath, waiting. War in the 41st millennium has its patterns. Days of waiting. Hours of drills. Moments of sheer, screaming violence. But that morning, with routine completed and silence lingering too long on the Vox, I knew something was about to shatter the pattern. The first warning came through the Vox. Joran was bent over the receiver, tuning the dials like a priest working a relic. The static was thick that morning, harsher than usual, like 1,000 voices hissing all at once. I saw him flinch, hand jerking away as though the machine had bitten him. "What is it?" Vera snapped, already leaning toward him. "Interference," he muttered, though his face said more. He pressed the receiver tighter against his ear, lips moving in silent prayer. Then his eyes widened. The sound wasn't just static. It was whispers. A dozen voices tangled in the machine's breath, half-heard words threading through the white noise. Some sounded like sobbing, others like laughter. One was my name. I swear I heard it, soft and drawn out, curling through the static like smoke. The rest of the crew noticed Joran's pale face. Cast dropped a shell mid-load, the clang echoing like a gunshot inside the cramp hull. Breck swore under his breath and spat on the floor, muttering, "Warp trickery. Has to be." Vera's jaw tightened. "Ignore it. Focus on the mission." Her command was iron, but I saw the shadow flicker in her eyes. The Vox spat again, louder this time, a screech, then silence. For a moment, the only sound was the growl of the engine. Then, suddenly, a single transmission broke through, words clear as a knife. "They are coming." Then nothing. Joran slammed the Vox controls, desperate to pull the voice back, but all that returned was static thick as smoke. His hand trembled as he made the sign of the Aquila over his chest. "Who's coming?" Cast whispered. "The orcs. The commissars." No one answered. Outside, the ash waste stretched endless, but through the vision slit, I swore the haze shifted. Dark shapes moved where no shapes had been, silhouettes lurching just beyond clarity. Orcs, perhaps, or something worse. My trigger finger twitched against the battle cannon's control. Vera didn't waste time. "Driver, advance 50 meters, eyes on that ridge. Gunner, ready high explosive." I said, already cycling the breach. The shell slid home with a metallic kiss, the cannon primed to speak death. The Leman Russ lurched forward, treads grinding ash into black smoke. Every groan of the hull felt louder in the silence between Vox bursts. Something was out there, whether flesh or nightmare, we didn't know. And all the while, the whispers lingered, curling like oil through my skull. They repeated one phrase again and again, buried in the static, almost lost beneath the engine's roar. "You cannot leave." Still, we obeyed orders. We advanced. Because that is what tankers do. Trust steel, trust command, and pray the Emperor's light holds back the darkness that presses ever closer. The ridge came into view like the spine of some dead god, jagged and broken against the ash-stained horizon. Breck coaxed the Leman Russ up its slope, the engine growling like a beast straining at the leash. My hands hovered over the gun's controls, Auspex scope flickering as it struggled to cut through the haze. Then I saw them. At first, they looked like shadows, blurred by the smoke and dust. But as the tank crested the ridge, the shapes resolved into hulking figures, orcs. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, spread across the wastes like carrion birds. Some carried crude slug gas, others shouldered rocket launchers, and a mob of knobs tramped in the middle like living fortresses. They hadn't seen us yet, but they would soon. "Orcs, a whole warband," I reported, voice low. Vera didn't hesitate. "Driver, hold position. Gunner, high explosive, center mass." My hands moved automatically, every motion drilled into muscle and bone. Cast was already hefting another round, sweat gleaming on his shaved scalp. Joran muttered a prayer over the Vox, static hissing like a serpent between his words. I took aim. Through the auspex, I centered on the mob. My breath slowed, fingers tightening on the trigger. For a moment, the whispers in the Vox seemed to rise, clawing at the edge of my hearing. One word broke through: fire. The cannon roared. The recoil slammed through the tank, shaking us to our bones. Outside, the shell screamed into the mob, detonating in a blossom of fire and smoke. Orcs were hurled skyward, their crude armor torn apart, bodies broken against the earth. The warband erupted in chaos. Some roared in fury, others fired wildly into the haze. A rocket streaked past our hull, exploding harmlessly in the ash behind us. Reload. Vera barked. Cast already had the next shell in his hands. The round slammed into the breech, the mechanism locking it with a heavy clunk. Driver, advance. Keep us moving. Don't give them a target. The Leman Russ ground forward, treads biting into ash. My heart pounded as I swung the gun to the left, lining up on another cluster. Another round thundered, another explosion tore the mob apart. The orcs answered with fury. Slugs rattled against the hull like hailstones, harmless against ceramite but deafening in the confined space. Rockets screamed overhead, some bursting in fireballs close enough to rattle our teeth. Breck cursed, wrestling the machine to keep us weaving through the storm. Through it all, we worked as one. Cast feeding shells, me firing, Joran relaying fragmented orders from command, Vera guiding our fury with calm precision. This was the routine of war, the deadly dance we had trained for. And yet, there was something wrong. The whispers hadn't stopped. Even as the cannon roared, even as orcs died screaming, the static in my ears hissed with words not my own. Not just fire. Other fragments now. They see you, they hunger, they wait. I gritted my teeth, forcing focus. The orcs were real. The shells in my hands were real. But the words. Emperor help me. The words were starting to feel real too. Still, the tank advanced. Still, the crew fought. Because in the Guard, doubt kills faster than bullets, and fear spreads quicker than fire. But deep down, I already knew. This battle was just the beginning. By nightfall, the tank reeked of smoke and sweat, its interior hotter than a furnace. The day's battle had cost us half a dozen shells, 3 jammed feed lines, and the patience of Breck, who had cursed the orcs in a dozen dialects while dodging their rockets. The greenskins had broken against the ridge in the end, their warbands scattered by the combined fire of our regiment's armor. Yet victory in the Guard is never final. Orcs never stay dead for long, not when their spores infest the ground, waiting to sprout more monsters. Fuel's low, Breck muttered, thumping the console as if to bully the gauge into changing. We'll be dry inside a day. That was the curse of the Leman Russ. The engine drank promethium like a drunk at a feast, and in the wastes of Barad Secundus, fuel was as precious as blood. No tank lasted long without the lifeline of supply convoys. Vera wasted no time. Joran, Vox headquarters. Request resupply. Joran bent over the receiver. The static was still there, a rasping undertone that made my teeth ache, but he forced the transmission through. His face tightened as the reply came back, clipped, strained, half-drowned in interference. Convoy, delayed. Mechanicus, rerouting. Hold position until contact. Cast groaned. Hold position? Out here. He gestured to the black wastes outside, where ash storms coiled and shadows prowled just beyond sight. We'll be gutted if the orcs regroup. Orders are orders, Vera said, voice steady as steel. But I saw the flicker in her eyes. She knew as well as we did. A stationary tank was a dead tank. We set up a perimeter, the tank positioned hull down against the ridge, coaxial bolter tracking the wastes. Night fell quickly on Barad Secundus, the sky choked with ash clouds that blotted out stars. The world became a void, lit only by the red glow of the tank's lumen strips and the faint flicker of burning wrecks scattered across the horizon. Resupply missions were routine. Normally, they were just another cog in the endless war machine. Chimeras hauling fuel drums, Mechanicus servitors droning prayers as they handed out ration crates, Munitorum clerks scribbling notes on parchment. But in the wastes, routine was fragile. A single ambush, a single miscalculation, and the lifeline snapped. Hours crawled past. No convoy. Just the whispers in the Vox, louder now, threading through every channel. They had shape to them, like voices pressing against the veil, waiting to slip through. I tried to ignore it. Checked the cannon again. Cleaned the sights. Even stripped the bolt assembly of the heavy bolter. Anything to focus my mind on steel and oil rather than the phantom voices calling my name. Then Cast muttered something that chilled the compartment. What if it ain't the orcs that stopped the convoy? No one answered. Because we had all thought it. The guard teaches you to fear many things: starvation, orcs, traitors, the commissar's bolt pistol. But that night, as the tank waited in silence for fuel that might never come, I realized there were darker things prowling the wastes. Things that whispered through machines. Things that bled into reality when the veil was thin. And with every tick of the engine, with every hiss of the Vox, it felt like those things were drawing closer. The knock of a bolt pistol on the hatch shattered the silence. Crew of Saint's Fury, stand to. The voice outside was hard as stone, carrying the clipped cadence only one rank could bear. Commissar. Vera unsealed the hatch, and the red-trimmed greatcoat of Commissar Tal loomed above us, silhouetted against the faint fireglow of the wastes. His eyes were as cold as the ash under our boots, his bolt pistol gleaming in one hand, a power sword sheathed at his side. He stepped into the compartment with the authority of a man who owned every soul aboard. "Your fuel's dry," he said without preamble, gaze sweeping over the five of us like a guillotine. "You wait here, you die here. Cowards wait. Loyal soldiers endure." No one dared speak. In the cramped space of a tank, a commissar's presence was suffocating, a constant reminder that fear of the enemy was second only to fear of hesitation. Joran shifted uncomfortably by the Vox, its static still whispering in the background. Tal's gaze fell on him instantly. Why is that cursed machine hissing like a demon's breath? "Interference, Commissar," Joran stammered. "The ash storms. Excuses are for heretics." Tal's voice was a growl. He leaned closer, his words hot and sharp. "If you falter because of whispers, the Emperor will not forgive you. And neither will I." His hand brushed the bolt pistol meaningfully. Vera, to her credit, didn't flinch. "Commissar, the crew is steadfast. Whatever foulness lingers in the Vox, we will not falter." Tal studied her for a moment, then gave a curt nod. "See that you don't. The orcs are regrouping. Supplies are delayed. And I will not have weakness infecting this company." Then his gaze shifted to Cast, who had frozen mid-load, a shell resting heavy in his hands. "You there. Loader." Cast swallowed hard. "Yes, Commissar." "Do you fear?" Cast hesitated. Too long. The compartment froze. The Commissar's pistol rose, the barrel leveling with Cast's forehead. The loader's breath hitched, his arms trembling under the weight of the shell. "No, Commissar," he croaked finally. I serve the Emperor." The silence stretched. Then Tal lowered the pistol, slowly. "Good. Remember this moment. Fear is the weapon of the alien, the heretic, the witch. A guardsman fears nothing but failure." Cast exhaled in a shudder, but his hands steadied on the shell. Without another word, the Commissar climbed back out, sealing the hatch with a final clang. His presence lingered like smoke, the promise of death hanging over every one of us. Inside the tank, no one spoke for several minutes. The only sound was the engine's idle growl and the ever-present hiss of the Vox, whispering just low enough to be mistaken for thought. The Commissar had reminded us of discipline. But the whispers reminded us of something else. Discipline might keep you alive in the guard, but it would not save you from whatever waited beyond the veil. The next day, the battlefield was still smouldering when we pushed forward again. Burnt orc wreckage littered the wastes, bodies strewn like discarded toys, their crude weapons half buried in ash. The silence should have been a comfort, proof of victory, but it felt wrong. Orcs don't leave silence behind. Even in death, they leave echoes of their rage. As we rolled past a ruined hablock, Cast spoke first. "Anyone else see that?" Through the slit, I glimpsed it too, crude glyphs scrawled across the shattered wall. Orc markings, but twisted. Not daubed in crude paint, but burned into the stone itself, blackened as if by fire that left no smoke. The symbols seemed to shift as the tank passed, curling into shapes my eyes didn't want to follow. "Orcs don't carve like that," Breck muttered, his knuckles white on the controls. Vera's voice cut across the compartment. "Eyes forward. Orcs are cunning, but tricks don't kill as surely as a slug to the head." But Joran kept staring at the Vox. The whispers had changed. No longer random, no longer scattered fragments. They were repeating something, steady as a heartbeat, too faint for me to catch clearly. His lips moved unconsciously, mouthing the words. Joran, I snapped, louder than I intended. What's it saying? He blinked, as though waking from a dream. Nothing. Just interference. Lie. His voice shook too much for it to be anything else. The tank pushed deeper into the ruins. The air grew heavy, tasting of rust and old blood. In the shadow of broken spires, more of the burned glyphs appeared. Some on walls, others gouged into the ground itself. Each one thrummed with a wrongness that made my skull ache. Then, as we cleared a courtyard, we saw them. Piles of orc corpses, stacked deliberately, not scattered by battle. Their eyes had been gouged out, jaws locked in silent screams. Around the bodies, the same seared glyphs marked the earth, arranged in circles that seemed to pulse faintly with heat. Cast swore, his voice breaking. The orcs didn't do this. Emperor's blood, they didn't. Silence, Vera snapped, though her own voice wavered. She turned to me. Gunner, if you see movement, burn it down. No hesitation. I said, though my stomach nodded. Because hesitation wasn't the danger anymore. Whatever had twisted this place, whatever had carved those marks into stone and flesh, it wasn't something a battle cannon could kill. The Vox hissed again, louder now, and Joran flinched as if struck. The words finally reached my ears, clear enough that I couldn't pretend anymore. They are watching. I didn't know if he meant orcs, or if he meant something far worse. That night, we made camp in the shell over the next day. The battlefield was still smoldering when we pushed forward again. Burnt orc wreckage littered the wastes, bodies strewn like discarded toys, their crude weapons half buried in ash. The silence should have been a comfort, proof of victory, but it felt wrong. Orcs don't leave silence behind. Even in death, they leave echoes of their rage. As we rolled past a ruined hablock, Cast spoke first. Anyone else see that? Through the slit, I glimpsed it too, crude glyphs scrawled across the shattered wall. Orc markings, but twisted. Not daubed in crude paint, but burned into the stone itself, blackened as if by fire that left no smoke. The symbols seemed to shift as the tank passed, curling into shapes my eyes didn't want to follow. Orcs don't carve like that, Breck muttered, his knuckles white on the controls. Vera's voice cut across the compartment. Eyes forward. Orcs are cunning, but tricks don't kill as surely as a slug to the head. But Joran kept staring at the Vox. The whispers had changed. No longer random, no longer scattered fragments. They were repeating something, steady as a heartbeat, too faint for me to catch clearly. His lips moved unconsciously, mouthing the words. Joran, I snapped, louder than I intended. What's it saying? He blinked, as though waking from a dream. Nothing. Just interference. Lie. His voice shook too much for it to be anything else. The tank pushed deeper into the ruins. The air grew heavy, tasting of rust and old blood. In the shadow of broken spires, more of the burned glyphs appeared. Some on walls, others gouged into the ground itself. Each one thrummed with a wrongness that made my skull ache. Then, as we cleared a courtyard, we saw them. Piles of orc corpses, stacked deliberately, not scattered by battle. Their eyes had been gouged out, jaws locked in silent screams. Around the bodies, the same seared glyphs marked the earth, arranged in circles that seemed to pulse faintly with heat. Cast swore, his voice breaking. The orcs didn't do this. Emperor's blood, they didn't. Silence, Vera snapped, though her own voice wavered. She turned to me. Gunner, if you see movement, burn it down. No hesitation. I said, though my stomach nodded. Because hesitation wasn't the danger anymore. Whatever had twisted this